One. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Art of the Data Science podcast. I'm your host, Harpreet Sahota, joining you live and direct from the Winnipeg Richardson International Airport. I just got off a flight. I was hanging out at ML Ops World Conference in Toronto. Huge shout out to the conference. It's a great show. Got a chance to meet a lot of cool people. Thanks for David and Faraz for hosting it. You guys did a epic job, man. It was a great presentation, great everything, dude. So thank you so much for doing that. Huge shout out to our sponsors for this episode. So this episode of the Art of Data Science is brought to you by Z by HP. Get rapid results from your most demanding data sets, laptop and data desktop workstations. The Data Science Stack Manager provides convenient access to popular tools and updates them automatically to help you customize your environment on Windows or Ubuntu. Find out more at hp.com/data science. All right, let's get right back to it, dude. There's an episode that was released today with the one and only One Salting. Definitely check that out. It was a great episode. Had a good time chatting with them. I'm about to take off, but Vin is now the host. Vin, this one is you. I'm looking forward to tuning in and looking forward to seeing what you guys chat about. Y'all, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much again for putting up with another hostless episode. Oh shit, Nick Singh is in the building too. Nick, what's going on? Shout out to Nick, Eric, Mario, Jay, good to see you again. Mark, and of course, Russell. Y'all are awesome. I'm out of here. Peace.
Ruh-roh. When you hear the recording stop button, I think I gotta hold on just a second. Hey, and we're back. All right, welcome. I am not Harpreet, but I'm happy to be hosting this week. Appreciate the illustrious guests showing up, and as usual, everybody's going to come in fashionably late. So I need to stall for a couple of minutes and ask the original question. So learning. Everybody wants to know how to learn data science, how to get your first job, how to do that first job task, how to learn. But nobody teaches you how to learn the stuff that's like feeling impossible. And I talked to my wife and she gave me like this insight into learning that I don't personally have this. And I don't know if this is common, which is that people don't like to feel like they're stupid. And it's not just look stupid, because that's kind of obvious. You don't want to look stupid in front of other people. So you don't want to ask the stupid question. You don't want to say, I don't know, can you explain it to me? So I don't want to look stupid, but it's a different thought process. I don't want to feel stupid. Like I don't have to even have an audience to feel intimidated by learning. And so there are these kind of concepts where you look at a thing and it's like, even if I get to learn in private, I'm kind of intimidated by a topic. And in data science, we have a lot of those topics where you can look at a subject matter and just say, that is scary. And I think, you know, and talking to people about why don't you go into data science? Why don't you want to look at data science, considering you have a good background, considering this is a good field? And I think I hear that sentiment. So I want to kick off with, when you see one of those like mental Mount Everests, where you look at it and you say, that could make me feel stupid. How do you go step two, where you just kind of say, okay, I'm going for it? And how did you overcome that in the past? What was I don't know, maybe it's the mental process, maybe it was the actual steps and the routine that you developed. What was it that took you over Mount Everest in your mind?
Maybe I'll go first.
Yep.
I used to try to be brave and strong and climb Mount Everest, and now I'm a little lazier, a little wiser, whatever you want to call it. But basically, I just don't even try to climb Mount Everest, right? In my head, I forget Mount Everest exists and I try to climb a hill. And I try to find what's the hill I can climb. We'll do Mount Everest later, but is there a small hill that can give me some confidence, that can give me a little dopamine hit that, you know, when I'm on the top of? And I just try to climb bigger and bigger hills. But yeah, I always find just trying to break it down to something stupidly simple that you can do, and then going from there and worrying about it later is my mental hack.
So how do you break it down? Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with is I don't have a frame of reference yet. So how do I break down something I don't really understand very well?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I guess one of those topics is, how do you learn data science? Well, don't learn data science, learn SQL. Oh, don't even learn hard SQL. Just get like a select all query working and just do some basic stuff. Or let's learn Excel. Forget this programming language stuff. Can I do even basic? I think David Langer does a lot of stuff around here around data science with Excel, So that's how, but you're right though. I benefit from maybe being able to break it down just because I know what's already the advanced part. So yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I want to hear from others as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else? Oh, really?
I'll throw that out there. So maybe a couple things. First is not data related. So a few years ago, my partner and I wanted to travel more, and so the plan was that I was going to do like freelance work, and I was going to quit my job. And so I had to figure out how to do that. And then we were going to travel full time, which traveling takes a lot of work and a lot of planning. And I didn't know how we were going to like literally sell like all our stuff and move into an RV and like do all these things while also changing my employment and everything. And I was a little bit unsure about whether or not I could do it or find anybody who would pay for my work or anything like that. And one of the best things that like totally helped me turn the corner on that work side of it was this. I got a coach who, like, I remember, like, there were a couple that I wanted to talk to, and so I was talking to her on the phone the first time, and I was kind of telling her what my thoughts were, and stuff, and my hesitations, and she just like called out like the BS that she saw, where she's like, "Are you serious? Like, why wouldn't somebody pay you for this yada yada thing?" And like, are you serious? You don't believe that there are 10 people in like the United States that would pay for, what you want to help them with? I'm like, that's a really good point. It's really helpful to get perspective from somebody who had been there and done that, which I think is an important part of, if you're going to find a coach or a teacher, it's important that they can teach you based on somewhere they've been. And so that was a big help for me. And from there, that just gave me the confidence to say, like, I don't know exactly what I need to do next. I don't know who those 10 people are that I need to find, but I do believe that they are out there. So I'm just going to start working on it and working my way towards it and mistaking my way towards it too, which is fine. The other piece, kind of riffing off Nick and what you were saying, like, yeah, don't learn data science, learn SQL, learn simple SQL, whatever. So when I started learning Python, I had like a little basics class on Coursera, but then I thought I want to do some data stuff, whatever that means. And so I started looking for projects, and then I just found like a big list of hacked passwords. And I thought I want to like analyze these and try and like figure out if I can see what makes a password more likely to be hacked, from like looking at 2 million passwords. But I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to say, like, show me the first letter of a string and like show me all of them and put it into a bar plot. And as I was thinking these things, I thought I got to figure out how to do these things. And so I couldn't see the whole path, like Nick, like you were saying, like that whole world in front of me. All I could see was I need to be able to figure out how to see the first character of a string, and I have to figure out what those words are. And then I have to go to Stack Overflow and like find questions and answers and read documentation. And when I do that, I find it gives me new words to then search for more new words. And then before too long, I start to have vocabulary and be able to participate. And, obviously you can supercharge it by having a good teacher and things like that. But even learning on my own, it can be fun to at least discover those words. And then I bring them here and I ask questions that can help me get further than just my own Googling and stuff like that. Couple of thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's just good points about the power of learning by doing, or picking a practical, pragmatic project. I think that's huge, because you're right. It forces you to do things and almost structures your learning in a little way, and helps you figure out what to ask, and you get that vocabulary. I think that vocabulary is a big point too. Once you know the language, you know what to search for, you know what to Google. And that's almost like half of it. It feels like it's just knowing what to search on.
Oh yeah. Like when I realized that in Panda's documentation, it says array like meant that I could put a list in there. It was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Now I know what that's talking about. You know, it's just like little things like that you take for granted. Then you realize at some point that you learned that and it made your life a little easier. And like, oh, thank goodness for figuring out what those words all mean.
Yeah, I think interesting story about learning from reading and not from hearing people speak is, especially with all of the mathematical terms, you'll hear people mispronounce words. And you wonder, like, why did you wait? What did you say? Why did you, like Laplace? You'll hear that mispronounced a lot from people who learn book learning because, we didn't learn from someone who said it. And so you'll mispronounce it the first time. And I tell people, like, you have to cut people slack because we all learn differently. Go for it.
Me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. I don't think there was a better time for you to ask this question because actually tomorrow me and my co-workers, we're actually going on, we basically have this event on Saturday every quarter, and it's called SQL Saturday, where we get together and we make a presentation about anything. It doesn't have to be SQL related. So my presentation is about the science of successful learning. Because a few months ago, I went into a rabbit hole about just the science of learning because I came across a Reddit post saying a single podcast changed my whole perspective when it comes to learning how to code. And it was a podcast about this guy called Andrew Huberman. He's a neurobiology professor at Stanford. And he has this podcast called How to Learn Skills Faster, where he talks about neuroplasticity and basically the key concepts about learning. And I could literally talk about for like the next 30 or 40 minutes about that, but I can really summarize, I think, the main key points that I learned in the past like 2 to 3 months of how to learn. And one is just realizing the learning process is hard. It's not easy because what's happening is when you're learning something new, you're actually changing your brain. You're changing the physical structure of your brain. And it happens when you make mistakes too. So making mistakes is not only important, but it's a fundamental step to learn. And that was a really key to me, especially when learning how to code or learning anything. It's actually seeing that when I make mistakes, you have this positive feedback instead of having something negative on you. Because when you're making mistakes, you open up your brain for something called plasticity, which is the brain's ability to change itself in reaction to making errors. So when you make mistakes a lot and you just make mistakes, when you finally get it right, that pattern solidifies on your brain, and it's gonna stick on your brain for a longer period of time. So making mistakes is really important. Probably the most important part is also repetitions. When you're trying to learn something new, you have to repeat that, or you should repeat that as much as you can in the first time you're trying to learn that. And then another also important aspect is called spaced repetition, where you leave some time between those practices. So let's say I'm learning how to, like Nick was saying here, I'm learning about SQL, I'm learning some select statements, right? So I learned that a couple of days go by, and then I try to recall that, which is called active recall. I try to recall that from memory without looking at the book first. I try to remember what I learned, and then just really practice as much as I can. And that is really gonna solidify that learning into your brain. Well, I can talk forever about this because I'm making a presentation tomorrow. But basically, repetitions is really good. Having the idea that mistakes are actually good, they're not bad. They actually tell you what to focus on. They redirect you on the things that are actually important. Those things really changed the way how I go about learning. And there's much more to it because I even ended up reading a book called Make It Stick, which was a book published by like 2 cognitive scientists and 1 storyteller, which is kind of cool. And basically the entire idea is active recall is really good. You're trying to remember things that you learned, but you're not looking at the answers. You're just trying to remember things and you're quizzing yourself. This is really important when coming to learning. Repetitions is really good, and leaving some space between practices. So when you leave some space, maybe when you go back to the material that you were studying, you feel kind of rusty. And sometimes you feel that that's bad because you're supposed to remember that. But that's actually quite good because it's forcing you to remember things. And the more you do it, the more time you spend doing that thing, the more it's going to stick into your brain. So there's definitely some techniques that you can do. Definitely quizzing yourself is really important. And also just, I guess, getting as many reps as you can, right? I think there's a really simple phrase that summarizes everything. Is basically the best way to learn, the best way to learn something is to do it. So just spend a lot of time doing it. If it's a really complex topic, like you were saying, try to break it down into smaller steps. Like, okay, maybe I don't understand everything. Like maybe talk about neural networks. Maybe I don't understand how a neural network works underneath the hood, but let me try to just understand matrix multiplication. Let me try to understand just a little simple concepts about calculus, just a little simple things, and leave some time. People learn in different times. One thing that really helps me is to try to change the mindset, meaning sometimes we think that I have to learn something in a week or I have to learn something in a month. And your variable is if you can learn that in that time frame or not. Meaning, if I can learn something in a day, then I was successful. But if I can't, I wasn't. Because that person was able to learn in a day, then therefore I have to learn in a day as well. But actually changing those things, meaning I will learn this. It is going to happen. Like this is actually a given. This is a fixed variable. I am going to learn this. Now, the amount of time that it's going to take, I don't know. Maybe it's going to be a day, maybe it's going to be a week or a month. I don't know how much time it's going to take, but I am going to learn this. This also takes a lot of stress out of at least my shoulders because, it just gives me some time to actually reflect and I guess learn at my own pace. So I know I spoke a lot about it, but I did a lot of research about that topic.
No, that was all great information. Does anybody else want to jump into this one?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yep.
So two more things that I want to mention, harkening back to my experiences of being in my first data science-esque role and job, is that one thing that has helped me, break down the impossible, as you have mentioned it, Vin, was to, one, look at how others have kind of approached a similar or smaller or simpler problem and see if you can grasp onto that. There's something that in this field. We're not blank slates. There's something that we can grasp on to see, okay, well, I understand that. What if I extended it by just a little bit, right? And see if you can keep understanding the problem space. Sometimes you'll like the approaches and sometimes you'll be like, wow, that was not a great approach, but at least I understood where they're coming from. And so let's see if I can alter that so it makes more sense to me. Another one is to reach out to peers, I think, in my opinion, to say for those who have been in a similar circumstance or experience as you, or if you're in the job or looking to be in the job, look out for those who have, done this problem maybe in the past or have implemented something similar in the past and ask them, hey, how did you do this? I got caught on XYZ. What would be your approach, right? Don't just ask for the answer, right? Because you're not going to learn at that point. Just ask for what was the general approach that you took and see if you can latch onto that and make it more your own. And I think those are the additional two things that I would add.
Yeah, those are all good. I kind of want to bring this back though to the fear part because we're talking about this like engineers, like people who have already learned the hard stuff. And there is that even before you decide, I'm going to, break the problem down. I'm going to, I'm going to do these steps or I'm going to go Google some things or I'm going to pick a project to do. There's a fear. There's a genuine, and this isn't a lot of people. There's a fear that's brought in by a lot of the academic system, at least in the US and in places that have similar systems where it's very test-based. If you take you have a week If you take a test and you fail it, you didn't learn it the first time, that's your fault. And there's a reinforcement there where, I'll be honest, I never had that. Every time I took a test and failed, I mean, my first thought was, well, why is that my fault? You're the teacher. I couldn't say that out loud, as a third grader. I thought that a bunch of times, but that obviously was frowned upon. My parents prevented me from saying that out loud. But it's really that test cycle where if you didn't learn it the first time, you're penalized because you failed the test. And I think just watching that reinforced again and again and again, you get into college, if you fail the class, you got to take it again. You got to pay to take it again. You might lose your scholarship potentially if you're on a scholarship. And it's like the consequences of failing the test compound. You go for a certification if you fail the exam. And so we have this, and it bakes in a fear. So how do you, talking to people just from that perspective of fear, how do you personally, have you ever felt that first? And then second, how do you approach the fear? Really, not even just the education, but the fear of it. Nick, I saw you nodding your head a little bit. What do you think?
I remove fear. I don't know if I'm the best person to talk. I think that I generally am not scared about these things just because I've done enough scary things. It's been really weird. I went skydiving like 4 or 5 years ago, kind of randomly. And I people roped me in. I was, whatever. I just did it. But I didn't think that would carry over into other things. And I know skydiving is kind of cliche as like the exciting, scary thing. But I definitely have found myself at other times being like, oh, why am I scared of this? I jumped out of a plane. Like my legs were actually shaking. That was actually scary. This isn't that scary. This is, we're on land. It's all fine. And just by putting myself out there, I've gone through a lot of scary situations to the point now I'm like numb to being scared about things. And I just kind of do whatever. I definitely think that there's something about like, hey, it's not just about being scared to learn data science or scared to learn this or that. I think like just this attitude of scariness, you can build up confidence through sports or running a marathon or what have you, public speaking. I feel like it all transfers over, but that's my take. I'm not a psychologist or nothing,
Yeah, Eric, have you ever like just felt fear about learning?
Oh yeah. Like, yeah, I'm definitely not to the point where I can say like I don't feel fear or I've just, pushed through it or whatever. I totally feel fear. I feel fear, I feel insecurity, I feel stupid, I feel unprepared. And I'm sure I have a host of unhealthy habits that I use to self-medicate and deal with it. So I was trying to think of something that I've been scared of and then like done something about. I was also trying to think of something that I'm like actively scared of and doing not much about, or somewhere in between, right? Less so about learning, just because to me, like learning kind of equals Googling, and I can Google by myself. It's very low stakes learning because nobody's going to be like, you stupid, what are you Googling? So it's fine. But learning in public or displaying my knowledge in public when potentially being judged, of course, like is so scary. And so one thing that I do to help myself get through that is phone a friend type thing. Like I have, my partner at home who is more daring in some ways than I am and helps me do stuff that helps me not be too boring, which is great. But then also at work, I have, just like a handful of people that in one scenario or another, I'm going to message that person, talk through something, think out loud before I go and say it in front of a larger group, or just a few different people. Like if I want to talk about employee engagement and company culture, I'm going to talk to this guy. If I want to talk about what I do with small business and loans and stuff, I'm going to talk to this guy instead. So having a few people that I can go to and trust and talk with makes a huge difference, because feeling fear I'm trying to make there's like a connection between, for me, like fear and shame, which thrive in isolation. And so getting out of isolation and being able to be vulnerable around someone that you trust can helps me. I'm not going to say it helps you. It helps me get past those things and become less afraid, even if I'm still afraid to act.
It feels like over time we lose the fear. And it's, we get to the point where we are teachers and we forget the fear. And so we don't understand why people don't just go for it, why they don't just take the class, why they don't sign up for the course, why don't they, why don't you just, you've got great potential. And I feel like we forget about the fear. And I've been trying to think about ways, that I can open teaching with an overcoming the fear type of moment. Let's do Russell, and then let's go from there to Merle again.
Just picking up on the fear thing, I think with wisdom comes a better set of tools to overcome fear. Wisdom comes from experience. And personally speaking, my favorite ways of getting over fear of, and I take your comments, Eric, being very pertinent, fear of shame, fear of embarrassment. It tends to be the fear of how the public perception of you will be diminished and diminish you in return. So how I've managed to get over that is find little micro ways of making myself immune to it. So purposefully do things that embarrass myself in public, but to a very small extent that you can bring humor around as well, and be a little self-deprecating and make it seem kind of natural. So if something happens organically that's unexpected and a little more embarrassing, at least you've got some kind of muscle memory for how to deal with it, even though it might be at a slightly different level. Another way that I do that is if I'm in a group that's learning, I'm one of the people that will ask stupid questions. I like to say there's no such thing as a stupid question. But if I see something that's that's a connection there that's a little ambiguous, I'll point it out and I say, well, that could be this. Is there a way we can clarify between those two things? Or especially if I feel there's a vibe with the rest of the class that they want to ask a question and they seem a little disinclined to ask, I'll throw it out there. And I'll be the first person to do that. And I think also that tends to break that barrier as well, and other people then feel more inclined to ask those questions that they were a little disinclined to before. So it's very much about your own self-perception, I think, and if you can start to adjust the way you view your self-perception, that's a great way to approach it.
I think there are two distinct types of fears when it comes to learning something new. The first one is probably coming from you comparing yourself to others. And the second one is probably coming from simply you're just too intimidated because the topic is too complex. So the first one, I think when you're comparing yourself to others, feeling inadequacy is different than an inexperience. And if you're trying to learn something really hard or just trying to learn something new, I think give yourself some time to just be kind to yourself. And usually when you're feeling inadequate, it's actually simply because you are inexperienced on something. And if someone is better than you, it's simply because not necessarily they're smarter than you, it's just they had more time practicing that thing. And the other one, when it comes to you are scared because the topic is simply too complex. I think everybody else already kind of touched those points, but I think being kind to yourself, breaking things into smaller steps, looking for help, all of those things are valid.
Nice. Go for it, Jay.
All right. So to overcome fear of learning something new, I guess it's sort of been touched on, but I want to say, like, don't take it too seriously. It's probably not as high stakes as you're probably making it out to be. This is to say the least. De-stress, look at it, and just try to take it as you can. And the other one is, if it's a huge field such as data science, or even a subfield within data science, take a step back and understand that the field in which it's in now, its breadth, was not always that. Some of the things that we take for granted today and some of the methods that we know today and use today were not obvious when they were first found out. And they took years of toiling to try to get it down, right? So that others could use it, so that people can stop asking this question, so that people can move on and keep searching for better and better. And I think that would be the other thing to take away from here.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good point. And I wish people saw, I learned my very first lessons about data science and machine learning in the 90s. I wish people saw how primitive the stuff I was doing with image detection was. I mean, truly, you've got models now that make your own filter. We didn't have that. I mean, if you want to talk about primitive, it's hand creating, edge detection filters. Like learning how to do that by hand seems like an abacus. Like literally, that's where it felt like I was. And so if you want, to an example of the silliest possible, just look back 25 years. And that is, 100% where we used to be. So that's just a great point. I mean, and all the greats in the field, I want you to look at them, starting in the 80s, starting way before I did. So if you think what I did was kind of janky, they had even jankier tools before that. And so it's a progression. And I think that's a great point, is that learning is a progression too. And when you take it not so personalized, where it's a journey, and it's a journey that everybody else has been on, that's a great way to look at it, and a great way to think about overcoming the fear. Is imagine your hero trying to figure out C, because undoubtedly it has annoyed pretty much everyone. It has dissuaded pretty much everyone at one point from coding. And I wish we could show that to people. Like, can I get a camera on me when I'm messing up my code? Can I get a camera when stuff doesn't work? Like when that one error, I can't figure it out and it's 2 hours later. I think everybody would feel better about learning if we shared that on LinkedIn. Like that was a LinkedIn Live. Watch Nick save Vin from making the same mistake 400 times. Anybody else want to jump in talking about the fear before we move on? All right, so we had one question from AJ in the LinkedIn chat. And it is, hold on just a second. Does anybody else here speak loud to their laptop and themselves during those mistake moments? Yes. Yes, sometimes in angry tones. Yeah, sometimes I say some things that I regret later. I have to apologize to the laptop. But all right, it looks like AJ is transitioning from mechanical, coming in from industry, looks like mechanical and aerospace. And he has the background, the basic background, highly analytical because, well, yeah, mechanical engineering and aerospace. Has the mathematical side, has the coding, understands the theory behind data science. And he's basically asking, is there, of the three main roles where you say data engineering, machine learning engineering, and data science, is there, coming from a role that's, fairly similar, is there a good lead in? Is one better than the other to try starting out in versus, them all being essentially equivalently different? So does anybody have any answers on that? Because when I look at it, I'll be honest, from the mechanical side, I always go towards engineering because you've already got that engineering background. But I'm interested to hear what everybody else thinks.
I jump in first with a non-answer because I'm unqualified.
Yes.
All right. So my non-answer would be, it's from what I have seen across companies, the same job title and its actual job description or the actual job work can vary so wildly that it's worth talking to somebody who actually does it, company or, certain companies, to get a feel for what that title might actually mean to them and how it might actually relate to you, because it's so subjective across employers. The end.
No, I think that's huge. Yeah, the job title. I did an applicant tracking system for resume screening, and that was one of the problems that I had to solve, was the fact that one job title could mean 45 different things, and there was zero consistency across. There were people who had a job title that were undertitled. There were people who were overtitled. There were, the gymnastics I had to do to alias job titles was amazing. Ended up just classifying what they said they did. It was simpler. If you can imagine that, instead of figuring out aliases for job titles, classification was easier. So yeah, that's a great point, is that job titles in data science don't necessarily mean what you think they mean. And I'm thinking that's going to be the answer, is it depends. It depends on what they do and how close it matches to your current capability set. So I'm just going to leave that one as is. If anybody else has questions, throw them into the chat, either here or on LinkedIn. I've got one other question I want to get into, but I will break that if I end up seeing somebody come in with a question, because this one's a little bit, I don't know, call it philosophical. I look at where we are with data science. I look at what companies do with data science. I look at what some companies have done abusively with data science. And I'm starting to ask the question, are we, as people, do we have the capacity to use the technology we have? I know that sounds like a little bit of a sarcastic question, but it seems like data science in some cases is a little too big for us. Like, it's a technology that could do a whole lot more if we let it and got out of the way. And if we decided to use it more selectively, more intelligently to solve problems that it was best to solve, instead of just throwing everything at it. And it feels like we've moved too fast. Like, we went from basic software to web to mobile to cloud to data to analytics to machine learning. And most of us mentally are still back in software. And it feels like that's where most companies kind of are. And most people's thinking and comfort level is back with that software paradigm. And it's a completely different paradigm. And when you try to fit machine learning into that, you end up doing some things irresponsibly, not always intentionally, sometimes intentionally, knowing what could go wrong. But do we really have everything we need as individuals, but also as businesses, to actually use machine learning? Or is this something that we're just not ready for, even though it is, maybe the first technology that's technically feasible before it is people feasible? I want to know if anybody has some thoughts on that. Have we kind of has the technology run faster than we can?
I don't really believe that. I think that it's doing as it does. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's too fast or too slow. I think it's just like a case of it is what it is. I think that, it's easy maybe because we know about ML to be like, oh, I think people are using it wrong, or people are still stuck in their own ways. But I'm sure people were saying that about software, or people who are really good at software and cloud. Look at people with on-prem today and they're like, oh man, they're behind. And I'm sure there are people on Web3 looking at fintech companies from 5 years ago being like, oh, these are not so great. And I'm not a Web3 fintech expert, so I can't comment there. I know my way around coding, and so maybe I can say there, but I'm sure this exists in every field where it's like, oh, wow, we're moving really fast, but there's a lot of people stagnating, or, they need to catch up. But I just think that's how innovation happens in every field. It's just that we know our field, so we can say that, but we don't know what's happening with CRISPR or biotech or gene editing or mRNA vaccines, and we can't weigh in there, but I'm sure they feel the same way.
Well, and it's not so much that. What I look at with this isn't so much that people are behind a curve, like you're supposed to be further ahead. What it really feels like is one of the powers of data science and machine learning is its ability for decision making and decision support, and the ability to make better decisions about. But as humans, we are absolutely worthless decision makers. And we're just so bad. And there are so many of these cognitive biases that prevent us from looking 2 steps ahead, 3 steps ahead. And so my curiosity is, can we actually use this? Is there a maturity that has to happen? Because we're used to software that just automates. It does whatever we tell it to. If you tell software, do this, it does this, or that's outside of what it can do. Whereas things like Alexa, ask it a question, maybe you get the right answer, maybe you get something that's complete gibberish. As we begin to get these things and these tools that have a level of parity when it comes to capabilities, meaning that sometimes if you ask a person to do something, you get a great work product, but every once in a while, they pretend to be more capable than they are, or we assume they're more capable than they are, and they end up kind of failing us a little bit. Do we have the ability to use machine learning appropriately? Do we have those tools at this point? Or is it, are we still stuck in the software paradigm where we expect it to always work, and it's not like that?
I don't know if I fully understand the different paradigms. So this is kind of the first time I've talked about it, but a couple of thoughts come to mind. I don't think that we as a larger, species are necessarily going to benefit from something like machine learning as much as we could in the future. But I do think that there are people who can use it to, I don't want to say to its fullest extent, because we're never going to be there, but there are people who can use it well. And it's probably something that because it's so big and because it's so powerful, it's probably something that, no one person is maybe grown up, in air quotes, grown up enough to use well. And because I was kind of thinking about it when I was a kid and I had a pocket knife, it's like an adult can use this pocket knife to turn a stick into something that looks really nice, something cool. I was barely capable of doing something without cutting myself. And yet I still felt as a older kid like I had the skills and pride, like I can handle this or whatever. But really, I was a stupid 10-year-old and just didn't see my own stupid 10-year-oldness because I wasn't a stupid 11-year-old yet who could look back on my stupid 10-year-oldness to be able to look down my nose at myself. So that's one piece. And the other piece that I just was thinking about as you were talking about the progression of technology over time is that we built this city on advertising. And so instead of building the internet on something different, it's not a pay model to participate in the internet, right? And so instead we built it on this advertising model. So we deeply, deeply, deeply ingrained funding and corporate greed and things like that into what we're now putting tons of our data on top of, and now putting machine learning into that. And so I know there's so much other stuff that machine learning can be used for, but I think that we have incentivized the use of machine learning to make money so intensely that I guess, yes, we have the ability and there are, to think how we can use this in a noble, helpful way, but so did the people who invented the internet. Ask Al Gore, he did. And so whoever invented the internet, like they had the right mindset of it being a free place, knowledge, and yada yada. And and it has grown into what it is. And so what's going to keep any other technology, be it machine learning or something small, or from kind of like going in that same direction? So I guess that's kind of my answer.
No, and Russell, you've got some good things in the chat, and then Jay, I want to hear from you on this too. So Russell, if you look lagged, so if you're not with us, just blink twice.
No, I think I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So I was saying, coming back a couple of steps. Technology's running or moving at different speeds in very, very many different directions. So it depends on the person and what they're doing as to whether they are ahead of the curve or behind the curve. So that's a real complicated mesh, and there's going to be many in different areas. So I'm not sure if I've gone back too far there, but what I then went on to say was, I suspect it won't be very long until we have some NLP models that we can just say to them with a voice prompt in the mic, build me a learning model to analyze bias. And I think I said in social engineering or in anything, analyze something for me and build me a model for this that's going to be completely unsupervised. That's going to take a million data points and feed something out, and it'll code this perfectly, and within 24 hours we'll have something that we can work with. I suspect that we're not too far away from that point now. I guess somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years. Although perhaps I'm being a little bit too positive about that, but technology is moving very, very quickly. And there was one last little quip that I put in there, which was just in response to what Eric was saying about wisdom. And I just said the only fuel for wisdom is experience. And experience comes from time well applied to events, which usually comes from age. So, yeah, you need to experience things to get the wisdom from it, and then the wisdom helps you apply your actions better. However, I was in the middle of typing that it is also possible to share wisdom with other people that are open to it. So if you have an open mind, you can get additional wisdom from others who are willing to share, and likewise you can share your wisdom with others that are willing to learn. But you very much got to be open to it. So break down the boundaries of vanity and protectionism and all that kind of stuff. If you're eager to learn. And I'm sure this community here, all of these people in the data and ML community on LinkedIn are the type of people that I think do learn from others' wisdom. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Jay, what do you think?
I think it will come down to quality, quantity, because there's already a bunch of data out there. It's whether or not we want to use that data. And so to hop off of Russell's point where you could just speak and say, hey, build me a model doing this, you run a very large risk of what data is it pulling? Is that the data we want here? What biases are baked in the data? Will that cause social dereliction or harm, et cetera, et cetera? And so to go back to the question, has tech run further than we have? No, I don't think so. I think tech, at least with data, has encoded what we are in a sense, at least in that time shot and time frame. And if we're not careful and we don't see where these biases come from, they will propagate forward and cause problems down the line. And so it's always constant vigilance. Someone has to look at the data. Someone has to see, hey, wait a second, something's not quite right here. We've caused a harm and now we gotta somehow undo that. It's never ending. It's Sisyphean in a sense, but it's what it is.
All right. I appreciate everybody's thoughts on that. We got a question from Harpreet, and it's his show. So if I don't ask this question, I think I'm fired. He may just basically boot me after that one. So he's asking, how do you evaluate a new tool or a library or framework for a particular use case? And my answer is just, why bring another one on board? Like, I make someone literally defend their lives before I let them bring a new tool in. It's literally a death match and everyone kind of knows that because tools get expensive fast, and even the free tools get expensive because eventually you realize that free tool now is duplicating something else. And so you have two very smart people in love with two completely different tools for exactly the same thing. And if you don't death match every tool before you let it in and let the team decide, okay, we've all been satisfied, it has entered the ring and it has survived the gauntlet, then at some point you'll have two data scientists like fencing each other in the hallway or something. And I, yeah, I make people defend their tools to the end. I think that's my contribution, is the old man who says, why do we need another tool to do the same thing? I got a flip phone. This phone works. I don't need an iPhone. Python, who needs it? I got Java. C is even better. So how do you evaluate a new tool from some people who don't have as much gray hair as I do? All right, Nick, I'm just going to call you out. It's on you. You got to save the day.
I don't. I did a little bit of the sales and marketing stuff, so I was the one trying to figure this question out too. How can I help? I used to work at a geospatial data company called Safecraft that had like alternative data around stores and how many people visited those stores, and we tried to sell those data sets to data scientists and ML teams at real estate companies and hedge funds and things like that. So I always went the other way. Like, how do I figure out how we can sell some of this data? And I'm sure Harpreet is figuring that out too. At I think he just got a new job at Pachyderm. Is that what it's called? So I want to hear from y'all, because I don't think I'm the right person. More of my thinking has been on the other side. And then we'll see. If I know what I'm doing there.
Anybody else want to dive in on this? Has anybody else had the opportunity to do a tools evaluation?
For a couple ideas. I mean, the most basic thing that comes to mind for me from when I was doing some of that in a previous role was to say, like, really understand what is it that we as a company need, because pretty much all of these tools are about the same. They're all going to be pretty much the same. So is it that we are going to be price sensitive? Is it that we want like a specific feature because we really need it? And so, like, even though 80 to 90% of the product is the same, if this one has that extra feature, that ability to help us like visualize our workload, or it integrates with some other tool that we have, or it has a smoother Salesforce integration or something like that, like, you got your table stakes covered. What is it that we as a company need? Because Nick is going to come with his bells and whistles, all a jingling and a whistling, to tell us why they think their product is the best. But if I don't know what is best for me, then yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to buy whatever and be in the market again, or frustrated with somebody who wanted to buy it soon enough. So I think being crystal clear on my own needs is probably like the most important first step for evaluating it. And then I guess from a trying it perspective, I think again, it's just like, I want to talk to people that you have worked with. So I used to sell consulting services, and like, smart people asked for references because they want to know, like, were they going to get their money's worth? And I was more than happy to furnish those references so that people could understand, because I wasn't doing the consulting, so I couldn't tell them any more than like why I thought we were awesome. But I hadn't bought our services for my own use, right? And so getting like testimonials, social proof from like people who've actually like tried it is, again, just money, because they've implemented it and they can tell you what the pitfalls are.
On the other end, like if I'm buying something, I think one thing I saw, I guess, on both sides of the table of trying to sell as well as buy different tools and data sets and services is that I think and this actually goes back to what you were saying, Ben, about like decision making and humans are bad. Like, let's say a tool costs 20K and a better tool that requires less time to implement or work with costs 30K. We as people are like, whoa, 10K is a lot of money. But then we forget about the loaded in cost of each employee. You know, let's say these data folks are earning 150K a year, loaded into the business, it costs them 200K a year, right? Suddenly you're like, oh, well, if, you know, 1/10 of your job is wrangling this tool because we didn't go with the option that's, you know, 10K more dollars, but it's much simpler to use, suddenly, you know, you've made a wrong decision. And I think it's because when we're evaluating tools, it's so easy to think of us as consumers like, oh, wow, this is 40K, or wow, my lawyer charges me $400 an hour. This is terrible. What a ripoff. Because it's hard for us to put on our business cap and be like, oh, my lawyer is saving me from this big legal problem, or, you know, smoothing out this process that's a $50,000 process. Yeah, I'll pay my lawyer $500 an hour. So that's what I've seen. Like, people forget about the time cost. Something related, but not exactly towards buying software, which is like you call for a group meeting, you know, and you've got 10 people who each cost the business, you know, 150 an hour. Suddenly you realize your quick 30-minute meeting is, you know, $1,000 expense. Yet it's like, hey, can we get pizza for the meeting? Oh, you know, we don't have $30 for that. Or, you know, I mean, I haven't worked at companies where they couldn't buy pizza, but, you know, we forget that these meetings of just, you know, 10 people, all highly paid, cost the business a lot of money. And we're just so bad about thinking about that when it comes to making decisions, whether it's for buying a tool or just calling a meeting.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has saved me from bad tools is asking, how does that tool cement itself in so it'll be impossible to get rid of? Because tools have gotten really good at making it so hard to replace them when they start to be terrible that like that's a superpower in the productivity marketplace and the digital transformation, you know, automation tools, ML ops, everything is like they get so deeply dug into your infrastructure that you can never get rid of them. You know, and I look at not only how easy is it to integrate them the first time around and get everything I need running, and how much service they provide and how much help they provide, because that costs more than buying the tool in the first place. You know, and it's the, well, and what if it's no longer what we need? You know, when we outgrow the tool, how much is it going to cost me to get rid of it and get something bigger? Because a lot of times it's easier to just get the one that there's no way for you to outgrow, as long as the initial setup costs aren't too high. And that's horrible for small vendors. And I get that. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to just say that, but it sometimes is the right way to go to get something that can't be outgrown, something that, you know, will be, you know, perpetual and never let you down, like Amazon. They're never going to give me up and never going to let me down. So it's almost good to go with that size of a company, in my opinion. And there's a saying out there, nobody gets fired for going with IBM. Nobody gets fired for, you know, going with Deloitte or Accenture or one of those companies. And it's really the truth. And yes, Kostap, I had to, it was too easy. It's Friday. We're getting punchy. All right. Anybody else want to chime in on your evaluation framework? Because I could give a bunch of like canned consulting answers, but I think they're all pretty lame. So I'm not going to go down that road. All right, Kostap, jump in.
Yeah, hey guys. I guess I'll throw down more on the supplier management kind of side, right? So one of the things that I mean, in the last year or so, finally started working with two things: a labeling service as well as a labeling platform, right? And the two things that I've found is it's very easy to underestimate, as you said, how sticky some of these products can get into your overall system, right? That comes down to essentially good old-fashioned clean architecture, right? I spent most of last weekend listening to Uncle Bob again and about like abstraction layers and things like that. it's on us as engineers to basically be able to define what remains sticky based on how much attention we give to the architectural layers between it. Right now, are we letting a particular data structure through because it's easy, it's already in a JSON, I can do it, let's just stick with that, I can't be bothered, converting that into, a more standard format or something else. So that's on us. Those decisions that we make to save time often make them more sticky, and we're doing that to move at speed, right? So that's something that I've been revisiting, is how do we integrate our labeling platform into our overall system to make that. I'm not so concerned about it being too sticky because it's a good platform. It's more about de-risking the project for us, right? That's where it really comes down. On the other side, what is very easy to slip, and this comes in evaluation, is manpower and time and forecasting. If you don't put enough time into forecasting how much volume you're trying to push, if you don't put the right models into how much time it actually takes to label your data sets, and I'm talking mostly vision data sets here, they're very expensive to label. They don't, unfortunately, come pre-labeled, right? Especially when we're working custom areas. It adds up a significant chunk of cost. And you sometimes, and it can surprise you what the bottlenecks are. So unless you're taking a fine-grained microscope as you're doing it, it's quite easy to miss those bits of the whole process that are actually costing you a bucket load of money, and you've just got expensive ML engineers or data engineers ending up doing it because they're like, oh, you know what, it's easier than setting up a process and finding a supplier. We know what we're doing, we'll just do it. But if they're spending an hour every day doing that, it starts to add up, right? But that's essentially where I see the connection back to sticky suppliers and back to how do you value time on a project, right? Is you've got to be able to keep that fine-grained microscope on at all times, essentially.
Thank you, Costa. Anybody else want to jump in before we dive quickly? I think I'll do like a 60-second drill into Mike Nash's question, because he asked it about 10 minutes ago and he's been waiting in the queue. Anybody else want to talk through vendor evaluation or tool evaluation? All right, we are on the last question. So Mike Nash asked, for business executives that don't understand data science and engineering fully, what are key points you wish they understood to make things easier? And I'm going to give like the 60-second. He said, please feel free to vent. I'm not going to do that, but I'll give everyone else like a good 60 seconds each if you want to actually vent. My one would be, not every problem is a data science problem. Not every problem is a data problem. Not every problem is an analytics problem. A lot of problems are software engineering problems. And if you have a data science team that's trying to talk you into every problem is a data science problem, start firing people until they stop, because that will immediately focus your data science team on like some really high value stuff that you can't do with anything else. So anybody else want to talk through that? What do you wish executives knew? What do you wish business owners, stakeholders, product managers, what do you wish they knew? Well, I guess that was the answer. Nobody else wants to vent on a Friday. Nobody's feeling like just opening fire.
Yeah, all right. I'll throw down.
All right.
Well, here's the interesting thing, right? It depends on their experience. Some of them really understand scientific process really well. Others come from very different backgrounds, right? And that's kind of why you end up in this weird mess. We have an expectation that leaders in a company, it's kind of our expectation management, right? Let's flip it on us a little bit. We expect leaders of a company to know exactly the details of what goes on to make that company operate well, but often they're coming from totally different backgrounds, right? They might be coming from an operational space. They might be coming from a financial space. They might be coming from all sorts of places, right? So it's on us to understand what is it that they don't understand and communicate that back to them. So I guess the best qualities I like to see is they're able to listen and identify when they don't know the best way through something, right? So the ones who don't listen, the ones who are just, a bit bullheaded and say, no, we're going to solve it this way because it's solved their problems before, without understanding the nuance of of this particular space, because this is a nuanced space and it is a complicated space that a lot of people haven't traversed before. It's understanding the risks associated with that and having the humility to kind of go, okay, let's step back a second. What we did before might not work in this situation.
Awesome. Really, you look like you were about to get yourself in a little trouble on a Friday. Don't worry, no one's watching except no one's watching. Don't worry, and don't worry about this being taped either. You heard the recording thing; it might get iffy. Go ahead.
Okay. Meetings that could have been emails. That's for sure. Yeah, that's a big one. I don't know. People with big ego, I think. One thing is when you work with people and they're open to your, I guess, suggestions. And I don't know, I fail to have empathy with people that have big egos, and like how Klaus was saying, like when you're offering a different solution, because the problem may seem the same, but it's really not. And they're like, let's just do this. We've done before, and they're stuck in like old ways, and they fail to just be open to new ideas, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point that on both sides, just that openness to new ideas, and even like both sides of technology. We have a traditional IT organization, you have a software engineering organization, then you have the sort of new school data organization, just being open to each other, and kind of going back to don't use a nuclear weapon for really small anthills. Jay, do you feel like there's something that you want to share with the group?
I think I'll hold my peace.
Okay, I understand that. We'll expect you to share at the next group. All right, that was my best interpretation of Harpreet hosting his office hours that he actually somehow skidded into from the airport. He literally got up off the airplane, ran to that seat, opened his laptop, and helped me log in so we could do this show. So that's some dedication. If you can support him, support Pachyderm, give him a little bit of like, a little bit of reshare, talk to people about the Artist of Data Science podcast that he also has where he interviews nothing but illustrious guests. And I am not being sarcastic about that. He's making me jealous in some cases about the people that I've wanted to talk to my entire career. And he's just like, hey, can you come on my show? They're like, yeah. So he has amazing podcasts. Don't forget about the Artist of Data Science podcast. And I appreciate everybody coming, everybody asking questions, everyone participating, everyone playing along with a little bit of the therapy session that we had at the very end. And everybody have a great weekend. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves.